Hello, good morning. I am Jan Leo Pilit from BSED Science TV, and I will be discussing what I have learned from our subject SSP 101, or Philippine Indigenous Community. Without further ado, let's start. So, first and foremost, I'd like to emphasize the subject's title, which I can now define based on a thorough discussion that has already taken place. Philippine indigenous communities in general refer to groups of indigenous people living in the same place and having a particular characteristic in common. I would say, for example, in terms of their language, way of living, beliefs, and common cultures. But hold on, we have already said the word culture, so why not define it as well? Culture is a way of life that a group of people have accepted without question and passed down the generations through communication and imitation. We can recognize distinct cultures all across the globe, and the Philippines alone has a plethora of practices that are unique to numerous ethnicities. There, ethnicities or ethnic groups. At first, the word ethnic groups seemed easy to comprehend, but not until we took the word indigenous group along with it. So what exactly are their differences? Let's take ethnic groups first, which are defined as social groups or demographic categories that are distinguished and linked in a wider community by shared racial, linguistic, nationality, or cultural characteristics. Notice the words wider community, suggesting that this one spans a wider area with a bigger population. That's why we have 8 major ethnic groups in the country, starting with Tagalog, which is the largest cultural linguistic group. Then Cebuano, Ilocano, Hiligaynon, Bicol, Waray, Kapampangan, and Pangasinan. We are also considering the basis for ethnic identity in our country. We have the language, the domicile or the dwelling place, the phenotypic or physical characteristics, religion, cultural traits, and ancestry or migration history. Those are for the ethnic groups. What about the indigenous groups? Well, indigenous groups are unique social and cultural groups with ancestral links to the lands and natural resources in which they live, inhabit, or have been displaced. In comparison to ethnic groups, this one focuses on a more narrow geographical area with a smaller population. Those small groups of people, then, are those who are native or original occupants of a particular location and who continue to practice traditions that predate modernity. They are mainly located in forests, mountains, lowlands, and coastal places, and are in varied levels of socio-economic development. In this subject, we have discussed the indigenous people from northern, central, and southern regions of the Philippines. Starting from the northern part, we have the first three, the Aplay, Balangao, and Bontok. I want to stop here because among all of the wedding rituals of these indigenous groups, it was the Bontok wedding that really caught my attention, as it was almost hard to remember the entire sequence. The ritual usually spans several days, starting with a woman delivering faratong to a man. Then it will be followed by giving the kaku or salt and fork, and then sapa or glutinous rice. The fourth stage is the insukatan ng makan, or the exchange of food by the two parties. Then it will be followed by the faray, or the process of entering and leaving the house together with the kaulog, or the bride's best friend. Then tongor will come after, or the marriage's alignment. Then comes the kamat, where the bride's parents will bring rice and salted meat to the groom's family. It will then be followed by the karang, or main marriage ritual. Then comes the putut, where only the relatives are invited for breakfast. Then, 5 days after this long ritual, the validation of marriage, or atufang, will be done. This is where the groom needs to take a bath in a spring and lists every activity and every person he will meet along the way. The bride, however, needs to plant crops in the field. If problems have been encountered, their marriage should be postponed, or what they call mangmang. But there is still one practice they could consider: the burning of rice husks or ipanang palay. If the smoke did vanish the next morning, their marriage would finally be considered null and void. But if the smoke does not vanish, their marriage will be accepted and they can finally be together, which they call manmanok. It is now upon them if they want to have a bigger feast. Isn't that ritual already big? Just kidding. So that's pretty much the sequence of the entire Bontok wedding. Now, aside from the first three I already mentioned, we also have the Bugkalot or Ilongot and the Dumagat, where the word Maedup actually means mabuhay. We also have Gadang, Ibaloy, Ibanag, Ifugao, where the famous rice sources can be found: Ikalahan, Isinay, Isneg, Itawes, Ivatan, and Iwak. Lastly, the Kalinga, which is the only indigenous group I have learned that has descriptions of the 5 zones of the universe. They believe in the existence of the upper world, the underworld, cosmic Daya or upstream region, cosmic Lagud or the downstream region, and the Luta or earth. Most of these indigenous groups rely mainly on Sweden agriculture and hunting and gathering as a means of living, since they reside on mountainous and forested parts of Luzon. Moving on, one of the indigenous groups from the central Philippines includes the Negritos, known as the earliest inhabitants of the archipelago, and they are the ones being featured in this video. Other groups of people can be found mainly in the province of Romblon, mountainous region of Bicol and Camarines Norte, and islands of Palawan and Panay. We also have indigenous people from the southern Philippines, starting with the Bajau or the Sea Gypsies, as we can see here, alongside Ubo Manobo, Belaan, Calagan, Bukidnon, and Jamamapun. So those were pretty much the indigenous people from across the country. And although they are rich in varied and mesmerizing cultures, we cannot deny the fact that they are being violated and discriminated against. They are facing problems such as genocide, crimes against humanity, environmental problems, access to education, employment and health, and most of all, extinction, either of their culture or of their tribe itself. As a result, we must continue to campaign for the recognition of indigenous people's rights across the country. Include them in conversations about land usage, for example, prioritize education, employment, and healthcare in their areas, understand their position in the larger discussion, and raise public awareness. We can then assist our fellow Filipino people in living a better and more progressive life. That's all. Thank you.